Hey everyone, Lauren here at Mill City Roasters. Today I'm joined by Gary and Julie Kratzer from GreenPod Coffee Packaging. There's like 4 words and I always mess up the order. We chatted with Gary and Julie at Coffee Fest New York, and we wanted to have them on to come talk a little bit about their business and what they're doing here. Remind me where you guys are located.
We're in Richmond, Virginia.
Richmond, cool. Awesome. Well, for the folks who have not heard about GreenPod before, tell us a little bit about the company. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so we are trying to help roasters offer a coffee pod, a K-cup style that is environmentally friendly and actually tastes good. So that's kind of the short and sweet answer. So they can send us their coffee, have it co-packed and have something they can be proud of.
Cool. Yeah, I was very impressed with the cup that I had in New York. So, I have been around the roasting industry for a really long time and kind of came up in cafe spaces, and think there's a real stigma against single serve, which I think is probably pretty deserved. Like we've all had some pretty rough single serve cups in our life. But, the more that we work with roasters, the more we keep having that question come back to us, what do I do? Because my customers are asking for this, or I really want to go after this this hotel account or this local office or this local hospital, but they really want a K-cup option. And, there just really isn't too much to point them towards that's really high quality. But your specific cup is a little bit different, I think, both in the material and some of the thought behind the design. So tell us about how that kind of compares to what else is on the market.
Yes, that's a great question. I mean, one thing is when we figured this out and we worked with an Italian company, the Italians really know coffee. They have high quality standards, and a couple things that are specifically different about this pod, other than the obvious of being compostable, is there's no degassing involved. So because it's a soft pod that fits inside a pillow pouch, you can grind fresh, immediately package within seconds. Yeah, there you go.
Model. Compostable bag, so
Yeah.
nitrogen purged. So yeah, fresh coffee's going in and it can just degas right into the pouch.
And the other really nice aspect is just the right coffee to water ratio. So we're normally between 13 and 14 grams of coffee. That is the single biggest thing you can do with the conventional Keurig style pods to get a better tasting cup, is just using the right amount of coffee.
Yeah,
So
and traditional, like most of the K-cup style options you see out there are like 6 grams, 7 grams.
they're
They can
10
be
to 11, but
10 to 11, yeah.
7 are like some of the poorest
Yeah.
ones. The better ones you can find 9 to 10, but yeah, they normally max out at about 10.
Yeah. Yeah, and your pod, Julie, I'm glad you had a little visual for us. Is like it really looks like a little paper filter basket, like a little mini. Yeah.
Here's one without the pouch. So that's just a pleated, paper filter. So that helps us get a lot more volume in there. And we're able to treat it like specialty coffee as well. We're not setting a machine and just running it like commodity. We're testing TDS, we're testing extraction, we're doing taste testing to really dial in every coffee that we work with.
So you change your parameters a little bit from each different offering or each different roaster that you work with?
we do, and a lot of that is kind of your general rules of thumb, to where with darker roast you can get by with a coarser grind. Some of the finer roast you need to grind a little finer just to help with the extraction because it's not as soluble. But all coffees are a little bit different. I mean, some of them just extract really great, and then you get some that you really have to work with to get the best flavor that you can. So, there's a short dial-in process every time.
My days of being a barista, there are always going to be some single origin coffees, especially on that lighter roast spectrum, that just really give you a hard time and really need a lot of like coaxing to sort of get something good.
Right.
What's your kind of ideal range? What sort of targets are you trying to hit for TDS?
Yeah, so we typically try to go between 1 and 1.25 for an 8-ounce brew. So thinking there's, if you want something stronger, you can always just dial down your coffee volume. If you want a little bit weaker, you can
Used to
go
Keurig,
up
they
a little
can go
bit.
up a size.
Yeah. What one challenge you have, and our job is to really understand the pods, and I can make a pod taste phenomenal and have like a 50% chance of it just busting in the Keurig, right? If you put too fine a grind, too much coffee, it's going to cause problems. So you have to balance like the quality and the cleanliness of the brew and also with the flavor you're going to get. Because you don't want to, when you're doing any kind of large scale manufacturing, you got to make something that's going to work for the masses but cause the least amount of problems. So that's the other parameters. We actually monitor brew pressure, and we do part of the dial in process. If I need it to be stronger in TDS, do I add more coffee or grind finer?
Yeah.
And those can have a different influence on brew pressure. So that's a lot of, working we do just to get the best flavor we can.
Yeah, I'm sure anyone who's worked with, who's used like those refillable K cups at home has probably exploded one or two. Keurigs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So I know you guys have a large Mill City roaster. You're on a 30K, right?
Correct.
So what came first? Was it the roasting or the packaging?
Definitely the roasting.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to give you how we started. So we started back in 2018 with a 500 kilogram, not kilogram, gram, right?
Sure.
500 gram, the little Hookie roaster out of Taiwan.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was great. I brought some coffee to the office where I worked and made people drink it and use their facial expressions to gauge the quality. But
That's not the one. Yeah.
yeah, but so I did the Mill City class in 2018, and it was very helpful just to kind of get going. And then we bought the 3 kilogram machine for. I had that for 2-3 years, and then
Before all this.
yeah. And then the packaging probably is what helped influence the decision to go to 30K.
Cool.
That
Yeah.
way we had the flexibility for big orders, big private label orders, beyond just what we were selling under our own customer facing brand.
Yeah. So the packaging, the machine itself is pretty complicated. We talked about this in New York. It's sort of, you kind of need like an engineering degree to operate it and run it and dial it in. And, I was telling you my background in working for larger roasters on the West Coast. Like I worked for companies that had a couple of these packaging machines on the floor, and, the crew of Italians that they send to set it up and dial it in, and the level of training that our operators needed, so how did you decide to take that on, and what were some of the challenges of getting it kind of up and running?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, my background is mechanical engineering, and I spent a couple years right out of college doing industrial maintenance at an acid plant. So a lot of things broke.
Ate themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I'm used to industrial machinery, and from that I spent about 15 years in new product development and setting up prototypes, product launches, and we would scale up production. So I would make prototypes in like a pilot plant, and then we'd build our own machines, and then from there we would scale up to an industrial scale and set up manufacturing all over the world. So I'm used to kind of that progression and growth, and then just the general understanding of machineries, servo motors, PLCs, all the electronics, just the way that you can interface with a machine and control it.
All the
And it
same
was,
stuff you see on
yeah,
the panel back here. Yeah.
I don't want to say that it's basic, but that's one reason that roaster is so great is it's very, very simple, and it works. It just
Yeah,
works.
well, I mean, that's some of the thought process behind the design of our roasters too, is that people should be able to work on them. If we need to provide tech support, we could do it like this over a call, because everything is pretty accessible and it is very straightforward. So, so you're saying like even this really complicated, like looking kind of big packaging machine, at its core is kind of a bunch of like nuts and bolts that are pretty easy to,
Correct.
yeah.
That's right. It's pneumatics, it's servo motors. I think one of the biggest features of a machine like that is the programming behind it,
Yeah.
to where from one, HMI screen, I can access all the parameters and change my sealing pressure, my sealing temperature, how fast the sealer accelerates, how fast it retracts. Like you can just dial everything in, and then you just have to have the right kind of understanding and know how not to get things out of whack. So understanding, if you're going to do an experiment and look at, how how much pressure, temperature applying to a filter paper or a lid. You can do that in a very controlled manner. We used a lot of statistics just to make sure that we don't get some false positives or false negatives. And we worked with the manufacturer Eka over in Italy, to really help dial in, one, just the machine itself, but also the process to run it.
That's kind of how we ended up with a smaller
Yeah.
version, because
Yeah.
typically these kinds of machines are huge and create those really high minimum orders that make it hard for us smaller businesses to get on them. So because they needed basically a testing facility and they needed an engineer to help, we ended up getting what they consider to be a research size machine, being a single lane. But that just gives us this fantastic flexibility with the batch size to be, super accessible to the people like us that were looking for something better and just didn't have an option.
Yeah, that brings up like kind of my next question, because I know as a co-packer, so you work with other roasters, and what was really interesting to myself and to Steve was this idea that someone who's on a small roaster, a 3K, a 6K, and we get these calls, we get these questions. Someone just in North Carolina last month, they're on a 6K, and they're like, people are asking us for K-cups and I don't know what to do. And she was like, should I go out and buy one of these packaging machines that build K-cups? And I said, don't do that. I said, that's so much work. Those are so complicated, and maintenance and operation is a big project to take on. I said, your best bet is to find a co-packer and just do one run, and just kind of do proof of concept, right? Just to figure out, is there a customer out here for this? Or are you just hearing like the same, two old ladies who are asking for a product, and that's really the only person who wants it? And because that's who it is. There's a certain demographic of customer who wants that convenience. And but even when I was making that recommendation in my head, I was thinking, oh, this might not work, because I think a lot of these co-packers have 10,000 unit minimum orders, right? And so I was really interested to hear that you're working on a much smaller scale, right? So what kinds of customers are you working with right now, and what is the process like for them to get set up with you?
Yeah, so kind of the vision that we had from the beginning was we would be helping small, medium-sized specialty roasters, which is what we were before we, jumped into this, to be able to do these small runs. So like they're able to send just 25 pounds of coffee and they'll get back about 800 pods. So let's say they're selling that in a 24 count box. They're only going to have 30 something boxes of inventory. And with the nitrogen flushing, the shelf life is phenomenal. So yeah, it's pretty accessible to even people that are just still roasting from home.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. I mean, 30 boxes is such a small order. And, where I see the single serve application really, really work is, like I said earlier, hotel service coffee, office lobbies, medical offices, even, we had accounts at previous locations where I worked at car, car dealerships,
Mhm.
anywhere where there's a waiting room, a lobby, and people don't want to work on the maintenance of a big batch brewer, and they don't want to kind of keep rebrewing pots. And so having a nice, it's a nice element of customer service, that hospitality, to say here's single serve coffee, but being able to have something that tastes so much better is really remarkable.
Yeah.
Let me
And
show you an example, because when you mentioned car dealership, I
yeah,
don't know if I have one exactly, but because we custom print on the pouches, we've actually had people that roasters, getting deals with other local businesses. The roaster can logo for that business, essentially doing their own private labeling, put the car dealership on there. And then sometimes they co-brand on it, and other times they use a QR code to link back to their e-commerce. So they try the coffee at that B&B or what have you, they can buy the coffee from them when they get home. So
uh, and the cup that you guys brewed me in New York, I spend a lot of time in sensory, and people have come to our classes. They know that tasting is a really big deal for us. And I was a USBC judge for a long time, and I'm not kidding. I mean, that was a really nice cup of coffee, and I took a sip and I was like, oh, it's a natural process.
Yeah.
And it's when have you ever had any experimental processing method in a single serve, or B, really confidently being able to tell that it was, because you can really taste the flavors. I could taste the notes. I could taste that fruitiness, great body, great finish, really great sweetness. And so that's when, because Steve kind of came and grabbed me off the truck. He's like, "You gotta go taste one of these." You know what it's like at a show. You're like, "Oh, please don't make me like try another sample of something." We were across the aisle from the guys from Yemen, and they kept bringing over cups of French press to us, trying it. I said, "No, no, no, no." But it really was, very remarkable, very, very different. So in addition to working with some roasters and co-packing, you are also roasting under your own brand, or your own coffee kind of goes out as GreenPod Coffee, or a different brand?
No, we have our own brand as well. We started with that, we maintain that, but a lot of our business is on the co-packing side. And I think that's one reason to get back on roasters, why we really like the 30 kilogram machine. So when we roast for our brand, we'll roast a day or two a week, and we have plenty of extra capacity. But when we have some big orders for 1,000 pounds of private label stuff, we could crank that out in one day with the machine. And that's where roast replay is really nice, because you can just kind of set it up, let it do its thing, and you can be moving buckets around and destoning and stuff like that while the machine's running. So we probably do a lot of half batches, 3/4 batches, full batches, and it's really easy to control that machine across the different sizes. And believe it or not, our biggest problem is like storing 1,000 pounds of roasted coffee. Like, you run out of buckets, you run out of bins, and where do you put it?
Space, like it's just that's one of our biggest conversation pieces with potential customers and roaster inquiries, is like, people say, "Oh, I've got a 450 square foot space. What's the biggest roaster I can fit in this building?" And the answer is like, well, you could fit a big roaster in there, but like, where are you going to put your greens? Where are you going to put your roasted coffee? Where are you going to put your tables? Where are you going to cup? Where's your triple sink going to go? And you guys are in the same boat. You've got a 30K roaster, and even though, like Julie, like you said, a single aisle, a smaller version, I mean, that's still a really big machine.
It is.
We ran out of space much faster than we thought we would. It looked quite large when we moved in, and now we play Tetris with things every day.
When the weather's nice, we move stuff out into the parking lot and bring it back in at the end of the day. And
I played that
we have
game.
to have third-party warehouse partners to help store stuff. So
what's next for GreenPod? Is it a bigger space, or is it just sort of continuing on at this pace?
We need a bigger space pretty quick. Moving is not easy. We're in an industrial complex with neighbors, on each side of us. One's a brewery, so we'd rather them not move. The other side is like a pet grooming supply place. If they decide to move out, we'd easily just expand to through the sidewall. Moving is really complicated, so it's our last resort. But for now, it's just incremental capacity is a big thing. So how can you just get more out in a day? Sometimes when we do bagged coffee, maybe an additional weigh fill or additional bagger, making use of the space we can, and just kind of stretching out man hours is in our immediate future. And then beyond that, we have to add square footage.
Yeah.
What's the project that really tested your limits? What pushed you guys to the edge?
Gosh, we've had some full truckloads of orders, so that's 26 pallets. And to fit that, we literally, the weather was nice. It was like in the 40s, 50 degrees, like, oh, we could put finished goods outside with this. And we literally had 18, 19 pallets just piled up outside, making more, had to have the truck scheduled like the next morning. It was just really, really tight moving around. And I have some crazy pictures of just piles of stuff in the parking lot because you just don't have the room for it. But
that's still just up and take it away. Do you have a team, or?
Oh, we have about 14 people.
Okay. I was gonna say, like, wow, that's a real test of the
That's a little much.
We have our own lanes for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, we started quite small, but it's grown a good bit these last couple of years.
I think we have about 4 people more or less doing production full time. And in addition to myself, and then we have a couple baristas, people helping us with sales and emails and stuff like that. And then when push comes to shove, we all kind of bag and package. That's what you get you get stuck doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I got pulled down from the training floor into packing boxes. Always like around the holidays,
Yeah.
like when the winter blends would hit the shelves and we'd get big orders from like, Costco or Amazon or something. And, the company-wide email went out like, if you would like to get some overtime, like kind of all hands on deck. So I know what that feeling is, but it's good. It's so good to be busy. And I really like the opportunity, even now, just come in and be hands-on with the product, and sort of be part of that like supply chain rather than just sort of talking about it at the
Right.
kind of high level. Really nice. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask, you had some ideas specifically about roasting for single serve.
Oh yeah.
And we talked earlier about TDS and solubility. I know, darker roasts are always going to be a little bit easier to extract, but if folks are really, living in that, craft kind of specialty, pretty low percentage of time in development, what are your recommendations for roasting?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I hope one day y'all can do like a bigger segment just on this, so we can tell people go watch this video.
Yeah.
But so luckily, most craft roasters kind of shy away from the real dark stuff, and dark stuff is a problem for pods. One, surface oils are not fun to deal with, so not having the oiliness is a plus. But two, as the volume expands, the pod is a fixed volume. So you're actually going to fit less coffee that's roasted dark in a pod. So that could start to work against you in terms of TDS and strength. So kind of the light to medium up to the beginning of second crack actually works pretty well.
Yeah.
The main thing I tell people is don't skimp on development time. Like it doesn't mean you have to roast hot, but what you need to do is not approach first crack with too much momentum and hit first crack and immediately drop, because that's not going to give you enough time for the outside of the bean to be as consistent as the inside of the bean. It's not going to extract very well. You really need to give it time so that the whole bean becomes soluble. So we like to recommend like at least give us a minute to 2 minutes after first crack.
Yeah.
And that can be tricky on some of the lighter roasts to kind of get that pace. But we try to tell people don't rush it. It needs to taste good. Just give it plenty of time, make it as soluble as possible, because a Keurig,
You don't get a lot of brew time.
no, it's not a lot of brew time. You're at 45 seconds. That's like, an espresso shot's 30. So if you think about it, you don't have the pressure for that amount of time. It's a challenging extraction for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's, that's really in line with what we teach here with our roasting school. And when we did a roasted coffee evaluation this week. We usually do 1 or 2 of those every week for folks who want some real critical feedback on their coffee. And that's one of the first things that we test is internal and external electron colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know that if you have a huge spread between internal and external roast color, then that's probably what's happening is very little development, and you get issues with extraction and issues with flavor. I would correlate like the same problems that you have with packing a really, really light roasted coffee that has only been in development for 30 seconds is the same issues that anyone who's brewing and serving that coffee
That's
would
right.
have. It just doesn't taste very good. And we focus a little bit more on percentage rather than time because, across roaster sizes, your roasting times increase, pretty substantially. Like on the 2K,
Right.
a 9.5 minute roast is pretty common, but over here on the 20, that same is 12 minutes. So, we try to really say, and I don't know what your range is for percentage, but like maybe 14% is a minimum for a pretty light roasted coffee. And then that's interesting to hear that the dark roasts actually give you a little bit of a hard time, but the volume thing makes sense. And it's nice that your cups don't have to off gas because they're sort of permeable, but a dark roast has got so much more gas to sort of bleed out. But you still do nitrogen flush the pouches, right? For fresh.
Correct. That's right. That's right. And the dark roast can cause problems there too, because
do they pop?
They poof up more for sure. Yeah. And that's where we've had to work with the manufacturers to come up with what's the right amount of what a good seal is, right? Because when we get a pouch and we do a vacuum test, they want it to go to about 14 inches of mercury as kind of the standard vacuum that, potato chips, fig bars, any of that should hold up to. Well, when we put our pod in there and then it expands, what used to be good to 14, well, now it pops at 8 or 10 because of internal pressure. And then we have customers at 10,000 feet at a ski resort, and the difference between sea level and 10,000 feet is 8 inches of mercury. So now you can see where you really have to manage that gas and make sure you have materials that start off at like 18 to 20 inches of vacuum.
That makes sense. Yeah. So the plastic is also biodegradable, the pouch.
It's so the pouch is actually cellulose film.
Yeah, it's all compostable and all certified. So we love being part of the education side to that too, because we just don't have a lot of infrastructure in the country in general for composting. We've hit big on recycling, but we're learning that, a lot of plastic isn't being recycled. So we're trying to kind of help people educate their customer about that piece as well. So yeah, being completely compostable, you're going to have a true circular economy with this, and it can turn back into healthy soil. So we show people how we do it in our backyard, and we try to connect people with community composters if they don't live in a city with curbside. We don't either. And there's a lot of businesses that they're small businesses like us that basically contract like trash pickup service, but for compostables. So if we as like an industry help with bringing this compostable pod technology out, then end consumers realize, hey, there's a way to do this that's not plastic. And oh my gosh, it actually tastes better too. Why isn't everyone doing this? And kind of build that demand.
Yeah, I have seen a lot of those, and again, even being a part of a company that was selling them like recyclable K-cups, and it was, you had to take the metal ring off the top, you had to throw away the lid, it was just this one piece, and it was a special recycling. It couldn't go into city recycling. Right. So it was kind of like semantics. It was like, yes, technically it's recyclable, but not in the way that our customers are using it, not in the way that it's actually like realistic and applicable. So right. It's disingenuous, and that doesn't ever feel good. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So single-use food products are perfect for composting because they like the mixture and the remnants of everything, whereas you really need it to be clean for recycling.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, for folks who have watched the video and want to learn more, where can we find you? Where can we learn more about GreenPod?
It's a long address, but GreenPodCoffeePacking.com. There's ways to connect there on the website, and we're on social media too at Facebook and Instagram. But website is a great spot. They can actually book a call with me from there because the technology is so different. I love like joining people over a call like this to talk about it and share with them their options rather than just sending them a bunch of emails. So they can actually do that right from the website.
And you guys shared some video and some pictures with us, so we'll put those on our Instagram so people can see the pods and the machine at work a little bit, which is great. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to chat. We're really excited about this product. Like I said, it's a really, really nice option, and I'm excited to share it with other people. So thanks again, you guys. It was great chatting.
Good talking to you.
Great.
Bye.